The Principles of Economics by Carl Menger. Chapter 7. The Theory of Commodity. Section 1. The Concept of the Commodity and its Popular and Scientific Meanings. In an isolated household economy, the productive activity of each economizing unit is directed solely to the production of goods necessary for its own consumption. The very nature of such an economy precludes the production of goods for the purpose of exchange. But the various tasks that must be performed to meet the requirements of the household could be assigned by the head of the family to the various members of the family and to any servant he has, with due regard to their special faculties and skills. Hence the characteristic feature of the isolated household economy is not the absence of any division of labor, but its self-sufficiency, production being concerned exclusively with goods destined for the consumption of the household itself, and not at all with goods destined to be exchanged for other goods. It is, of course, quite evident that the division of labor remains very narrowly limited in the confines of an isolated household economy. The requirements of a family for a single good are usually much too small to permit an individual to occupy himself fully with its production, much less with a single manual operation. The available food supplies, moreover, are in most cases much too small to feed any considerable number of laborers. Societies in the lower stages of development therefore furnish us with examples of a complex division of labor only in the household economies of a few nobles, while the other economizing individuals continue to have little division of labor and narrowly limited wants. A people can be considered to have taken its first step in economic development when persons who have acquired a certain skill offer their services to society and work up the materials of other persons for compensation. The Theses of ancient Greece appear to have been artisans of this kind, and even today in many regions of Eastern Europe there are still no other artisans. Yarn spun in the home of the consumer is worked into cloth by the weaver. Grain grown by the consumer is milled into flour by the miller, and even the carpenter and the smith are supplied with the raw materials for products ordered from them by their larger customers. A further step into the path of economic development to higher levels of well-being can be regarded as having been taken when the artisans themselves begin to procure the raw materials for their products, even though they still produce these products for the consumers only on order. This state of affairs can still, with few exceptions, be observed in small towns, and to some extent even in larger places in some trades. The artisan does not yet manufacture products for later, and hence uncertain, sale, but he is already, to the extent of his labor power, in a position to meet the needs of his customers by making it unnecessary for them to expend efforts on purchasing or producing raw materials in a frequently high uneconomic manner. This method of providing society with goods already signifies a considerable forward step in economy and comfort for consumers as well as producers. But for both groups it is a step that involves several serious disadvantages. The consumer must still wait for some time for his product, and is never quite certain of its properties in advance. The producer is sometimes wholly unengaged and at other times overburdened with his orders, with the result that he is sometimes forced to be idle, while at other times he cannot meet the demand. These drawbacks have led to the production of goods for uncertain future sale, the producer keeping them in stock in order to be able to meet requirements at once as they arise. It is this method of supplying society that leads, with continuing economic development, to factories, mass production on the one side, and to the purchase of ready-made, standardized commodities by consumers on the other side. Hence it offers the highest degree of economy to the producer because of the possibility of full exploitation of the division of labor and the employment of machines, and the highest degree of safety and comfort to the consumer. Products that the producers or the middlemen hold in readiness for sale are called commodities. In ordinary usage the term is limited in its application to movable tangible goods, with the exception of money. Since the fact that a person keeps a portion of his wealth ready for exchange is not always obvious to other persons, it is understandable that the commodity concept was narrowed down still more in ordinary life. In popular language, the term commodities came quite generally to refer only to goods that are so plainly destined for sale by their owner that his intention is obvious even to other persons. An owner can express his intention in very different ways. Most commonly he expresses it by displaying his commodities at places where purchasers are accustomed to assemble, such as markets, fairs, organized exchanges, or other special places that either are well known as sites at which commodities are concentrated, or give evidence of being points of concentration by their external appearance, or by prominently visible characteristic markings. In popular usage, therefore, the commodity concept is narrowed down to a designation for those economic goods that are in such external circumstances that the intention of their owner to sell them can be easily discerned by anyone. The higher the level of civilization attained by a people, and the more specialized the production of each economizing individual becomes, the wider become the foundations for economic exchanges, and the larger become the absolute and relative amounts of those goods that at any time have commodity character, until finally the economic gains that can be derived from the exploitation of the above relationship become sufficiently large to call forth a special class of economizing individuals who take care of the intellectual and mechanical parts of exchange operations for society, and who are reimbursed for this with a part of the gains from trade. When this has occurred, economic goods no longer, for the most part, pass directly from producers to consumers, but often follow very complex paths through the hands of more or less numerous middlemen. By occupation, these persons are accustomed to treat certain economic goods as commodities and to keep special places open to the public for the purpose of selling them. Popular usage has now limited the term commodity to goods that are in the hands of these traders and in the hands of producers who produce them with the obvious intention of selling them. This usage doubtless arose because the intention of the owners of selling these goods is especially easy for anyone to discern. But in scientific discourse a need was felt for a term designating all economic goods held ready for sale without regard to their tangibility, mobility, or character as products of labor, and without regard to the persons offering them for sale. A large number of economists, especially German economists, therefore, defined commodities as economic goods of any kind that are intended for sale. The commodity concept in the popular sense is nevertheless of importance, not only because lawgivers and a large number of economists employ the term in the popular sense, but also because some of those who are unaware of the wider scientific sense of the term sometimes employ this or that element of the narrower popular meaning in their definitions. From the definition just given of a commodity in the scientific sense of the term, it appears that commodity character is nothing inherent in a good, no property of it, but merely a specific relationship of a good to a person who has command of it. With the disappearance of this relationship, the commodity character of the good comes to an end. A good ceases to be a commodity, therefore, if the economizing individual possessing it gives up his intention of disposing of it, or if it comes into the hands of persons who do not intend to exchange it further but to consume it. The hat that a hatter and the silk cloth that a silk merchant exhibit for sale in their shops are examples of commodities, but they immediately cease to be commodities if the hatter decides to use the hat himself, and the silk merchant decides to give the silk cloth as a present to his wife. Packages of sugar and oranges are commodities in the hands of a grocer, but they lose their commodity character as soon as they have passed into the hands of consumers. Coined metal also immediately ceases to be a commodity if its possessor intends to use it, not for exchange, but for some consumption purpose. If he hands his thalers to a silversmith for the purpose of making silver plate, for instance, commodity character is therefore not only no property of goods, but usually only a transitory relationship between goods and economizing individuals. Certain goods are intended by their owners to be exchanged for the goods of other economizing individuals. During their passage, sometimes through several hands, from the possession of the first into the possession of the last owner, we recall them commodities, but as soon as they have reached their economic destination, that is, as soon as they are in the hands of the ultimate consumer, they obviously cease to be the commodities and become consumption goods, in the narrow sense in which this term is opposed to the concept of commodity. But where this does not happen, as is the case very frequently, for example with gold, silver, etc., especially in the form of coins, they naturally continue to be commodities as long as they continue in the relationship responsible for their commodity character. Two things are evident from this. One, the frequently stated proposition that money is a commodity contributes nothing at all toward explaining the unique position of money among commodities. And two, the view of those who deny the commodity character of money because money, as such, especially in the form of coin, does not serve any consumption purpose is untenable, simply because the same argument can be advanced against the commodity character of all other goods. Even if we were to ignore the fact that there is a misconception of the important function of money in the assumption that it is not consumed, for no commodities as such serve a consumption purpose, and least of all in the forms in which they are traded, i.e., in the form of ingots and bales, and in cases, packages, etc. To be consumed, a good must cease to be a commodity, and relinquish the form in which it has been traded. It must be melted down, divided, and unpacked, etc. The coin and the ingot are the most common forms in which the precious metals are traded, and the fact that these forms must be abandoned before the precious metals can be brought into consumption, and therefore nothing that justifies doubt in their commodity character.